So first of all, for a large company, that cash may or may not be an issue. Software, to me, when we buy software, I actually am not a fan of buying an asset, right? So it comes to the capital and expense question. So if someone sells software as an asset, the way that plays out in my world is it's actually different money. Capital and cash is different than P&L and expense, profit and loss and expense. So I have to have both budgets if I'm going to buy capital as an asset. But in terms of a profit and loss phenomena, it doesn't look any different to me than software as a service. Because I basically buy, a $100,000 piece of software as a capital purchase. I will then depreciate that software over 3 years. That is very important. Because if you get trapped into this idea that you're going to outplay the software, I'm going to buy this as an asset, and 3 years it'll be paid off, and then I'll be able to use that software for a couple of years and not pay anything for it. Wrong. So we basically buy the asset, depreciate it over 3 years linearly, plus there's a 15 to 20% maintenance, sometimes worse. It turns out, it kind of doesn't matter. So I look at software in my world, whether it's a capital purchase, a lease, or software as a service, I look at that on an expense basis. And then if I need cash to buy as an asset, then I do that. But that's almost a separate decision. Now, in a small company that may have cash issues, that may not be a choice. And so that's one thing. But with me, I do it that way. The second point that I would make is in the high performance computing, let's say finite element, computational fluid dynamics, control, dynamic, whatever. I evaluate software as a service in the context of what I just described. I basically convert it to expense dollars and compare it. What I have found in the marketplace for my software is that there is a margin increase on software as a service so far. Basically, the supplier knows that it's a risk mitigation strategy for me to buy it as a service. Because once I do buy it, I do own it for 3 years, and I do have to depreciate it over 3 years. They know that, and so I haven't found software as a service be the right price yet. However, again, if I come back to a firm that has a cash issue or isn't sure that for 3 years I'm going to use this software as a service would make sense. For us, we don't normally face that question.
I think Tom hit on an important point. We offer both, and where we see is it's more a question that typically of the customer scale and size. We see smaller and medium-sized customers may be more interested in software as a service. Larger companies do have budgets that they work with, and people have an investment budget and they protect an investment budget and they use it accordingly. So we see the greatest opportunity for us is with the small and medium-sized customers. And we spend time at GE with our corporate IT leader talking to all the GE businesses on using software as a service, software maybe that we don't supply. And it's interesting listening to people's view on it. And our IT leader isn't a huge fan of software as a service, but his view is you pay for that over time. If you have the budget, spend the money. If you're not committed, don't make the decision. So that's a big company like GE, but different when we're working with a smaller company that might need more flexibility or has cash constraints.
I don't want to buy software based on where it gets used. Now, the people who sell software might have a different point of view, okay, and I understand that, but Procter & Gamble is buying software, and if I use it in India, or I use it in Africa, or I use it in Latin America, or I use it in Cleveland, I don't want to pay a different price for it. Now, what I would rather do is say, I will pay for if there is a service cost difference, right? If you have a local support network that you have to support in Germany that costs more than the support network, in France or something, then split that out and I'll pay for that, right? But your IP for the software, I want to pay the same price globally. So that's where we go into it. So in fact, emerging market, if you will, for me, is not any different. We want to use that. We want global licenses that everybody in the Procter & Gamble network use. Now we understand when we negotiate our pricing that there are implications for that. Now for our supply chain, right, for people that we want to buy services from, let's say an engineering service provider in India, that is actually a big issue right now because a software license for them costs more than their people do. And so one of the biggest barriers we have with using global sourcing for modeling and simulation is they basically pay the same price for a piece of software in India as they would in Cleveland or Detroit or whatever. And so what that's lent itself to is lower end software tends to, or freeware or open source tends to proliferate. And that's actually not sometimes in our best interest because we don't want to get into that. So there's some, in an emerging market environment, with our supply chain, either engineering services or people who sell us bits and bobs or parts or products or raw materials, they're not taking advantage necessarily. And so that's one place where in an emerging market, lower cost and cash and software as a service would be better.
Good, good.